The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Season 13 of Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. Joining me this week on the Coach's Corner panel is Pete Buchanan and Alex Fisher. I'll tell you a little bit about both of them in just a few moments, but later on I'll be also joined on tonight's travel segment with co-host and travel expert Robert Kaufman, alongside this evening's travel guest, Vince Runyon, PGA and Director of Golf at the Omni Mount Washington Resort and Spa. He'll be joining us a little bit later on along with Robert. And then tonight's featured guest is Joe Pilcavage, VP of Marketing at Blue Tees Golf. He'll be joining me a little bit later on in the broadcast. So you want to make sure you stick around for that so we can see what's new and exciting coming out this season and maybe a sneak peek into 2026 at Blue Tees Golf. Also, if you want to watch this or any of the other previously aired episodes, you can subscribe to our iGolf Sports YouTube channel, and you can also watch it on Spotify.com as well. Just click in Golf Talk Live, and you can check it out on Spotify as well. Or if you prefer to just listen to the audio version, you can go to Spreaker.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. But again, don't forget to subscribe and get notified as new episodes drop each week. And if you are like many amateurs out there, if you're still struggling with your game, then I invite you to come join our growing number of Golf Tips Premium members. We have 3 annual membership levels available: silver, gold, or platinum. You can choose the one that fits your budget. Once you become a Golf Tips Premium member, you'll gain exclusive access to our premium instructional tips from our top 25 instructors, the latest golf news and equipment product reviews, plus insight into top travel destinations just in time to book your next buddy trip. And lastly, as a Golf Tips Premium member, you'll receive special discounts from our many premium partners like Cardio Golf, ShotScope, TrueLink Square, Encore Golf, Sky Caddy, and many others. Register today at golftipsmag.com. All right, we're going to get started with Coach's Corner. Let me introduce the gang, and then we'll get into tonight's discussion. So first up, of course, is Pete Buchanan. Pete's been teaching this great game now for over 30 years. He's the founder and director of instruction at Plain Simple Golf. PSG, as I call it for short, houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and Simple Swing Repeater Training Brace. Pete's been helping golfers around the globe focus on building a repeatable swing. And he's also among the favorites here on the Coach's Corner panel. And also another favorite, fast becoming a big favorite as well, is Alex Fisher, originally from Nottingham, England. Alex and his wife, Mary, settled into the Arizona area to continue his golfing career in the U.S. And in 2012, he was recognized by Golf Digest as one of America's best young teachers and top 40 under 40 instructors. And in 2020, he was added to the prestigious list of top 25 instructors with Golf Tips Magazine. And currently, you will see him as the director of instruction at the Glacier Club in Durango, Colorado, May through September, and PGA teaching and professional at the JW Camelback Golf Club in Phoenix, Arizona from October through April. So, guys, welcome to Coach's Corner.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted. It's great to be here.
And I would gather just very quickly, thank you. I always appreciate it, guys. Alex, I think you said you just drove back from Colorado last night, so you must be already down to Arizona getting ready for your fall swing of work. Is that correct?
Yep, definitely. There's no rest for the wicked. I actually have a golf school I'm teaching tomorrow, so jumping straight back into the triple-digit heat.
Yes. Well, good luck with that, brother.
Thank you.
All right. So as always, we try to, help as many people as we can here in the Coach's Corner. We've talked about a lot of different things. And I thought what we would talk about tonight is some of the more challenging shots that you might be faced with out in the golf course. And these are shots sometimes that the pros make look real easy, but we know from our own personal experiences that sometimes they can present a challenge. So I'm going to, as I said off air, I'm I'm throwing you under the bus first, Alex, just because you drove so far from Colorado. So I'm going to give you the first one. So here's a breakdown of some of the shots. The first one is the long bunker shot, and it might be, say, 40 to 60 yards. These shots obviously are challenging because they require a combination of power to get the ball out, and sometimes might even require a lower trajectory than what you typically would have with a green side bunker. So I want you to talk about some of the challenges with a longer bunker shot that typically people are faced with, and how it sort of differs from our sort of average green side bunker, and what we might do differently in this type of a shot as opposed to a green side.
Yeah, I mean, I think with any of these challenging shots, it's going to be hard first off for players or amateurs to be able to practice these shots. A lot of facilities don't have a bunker where you can practice that, whereas the tour players are more spoiled. Many moons ago, I was the director of instruction out at TPC Las Vegas, and we had a lot of tour players out there back then, and didn't really surprise me, but it was pretty cool to see them practicing those difficult shots. And there's a good reason why they are so good at that, because they do rehearse them. They're not just practicing the perfect shots. And I think that's one of the challenges that most amateurs have. They tend to fluff the ball up perfectly. They try and kind of create the most perfect situation, which golf is definitely not conducive to that, right? But in terms of fairway bunker shots, or even kind of that mid-wedge shot, that's a shot that I struggled with for many years. I got to a point, honestly, where I was playing holes in a very specific way, playing away from bunkers, because I just wasn't a fan of being in them. I could get out of them, and I was efficient enough, but it just wasn't really that fulfilling in terms of the shots that I was hitting. And right before my first year up in Durango, I forced myself one July to basically sit in a bunker for about an hour in 110-degree heat until I convinced myself that I could hit that shot. And it was just that determination that got me past the concern of hitting that shot. But in terms of, the thing I try and tell people first off is that, sand is just funny looking grass. I think that's the one thing you can tell when somebody's going into a bunker, just from their posture standpoint. Their shoulders kind of roll up. You can tell they're just not a big fan of the situation. So you got to try and kind of convince yourself there isn't a major difference between kind of hitting a 40-yard or an 80-yard shot from fairway versus hitting it out of the sand. Things I like to try and kind of remind people is that obviously the lip is there in front of you, not to get too greedy. I think the goal for most amateurs would be just to get it out of the bunker first off, and then take your medicine from there. But in terms of standing out on sand, it is an unstable surface. So the things I like to try and get students to do is obviously lean into their front foot a little bit more and keep the weight there. If you can set your weight first, and then just really kind of create almost like an arm swing on the way back, at least. If you over-rotate it going back in a bunker, it's easy to kind of lose your footing a little bit, and from there, it's hard to recover from there. But do make sure that your body does rotate through impact as well. We want to try and make sure that the shaft is leaning forward through impact, so we catch the ball before the sand. And just by getting your body to rotate through the ball, through the swing, I should say, a little bit more, it's a lot easier to keep the shaft leaning forward. But obviously, we want to make sure that we get out on the first try. And just by making those subtle adjustments in your setup, it can certainly help you catch the ball first.
Well said. And I think just to clarify a little bit, just so that people understand, because you alluded to this, but I want to make sure and just get your thoughts on this. So here in this type of shot, because you are looking at, trying to gain a lot more distance, you're not right beside the green, you're looking really to make contact with the ball first, as opposed to taking, hitting behind the ball and taking more sand, which you would typically do with a green side bunker. And that's really one of the big differences here as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, totally. I think when you look at a greenside bunker, you're using your hands differently. Where one of the big mistakes people make in a greenside bunker is that they close the face. They create rotation with their hands through impacts like they would do on a regular shot. But when you close the face down in a greenside bunker, the club tends to dig. You're de-lofting it. That's definitely something you want to try and avoid. In a longer fairway bunker shot, the release point through impact is going to be more consistent to a full swing shot. So yeah, you definitely want to make sure you are catching the ball first, and then sand afterwards.
Well said. And Pete, I'm going to come to you for this one here. We're going to talk about shots from thick rough, and I'm going to give you just a couple of examples, and I just want you to touch on those as well, because this is an area, again, much like Alex was explaining about the longer bunker shots. People don't practice this a lot because it's not really available on most ranges. Certainly, a lot of ranges out there are very generic, and there isn't a lot of room to practice this. So, I don't want to just talk about some of your rough you might see off of the fairway with a lot of our courses that we see here, particularly in the United States. I want to talk about, pardon me. I want to talk about rough like fescue and even gorse, what you see a lot of in a lot of the European style courses, and we're starting to see more and more here as they're getting into that type of more open golf course, but more punishing in that way. So there takes some certain techniques that we need to deal with in getting out of the rough. Certainly, you can talk about some general rough where it might be just thick grass off of the fairway. But I want you to talk about fescue and that, because that's something that, if you're playing, not one of the traditional courses that we might see here in the United States, you're going to get into some of that there, especially if you're going overseas. So touch on that if you wouldn't mind.
Well, that's a great question. I think, first of all, anytime you get into something, you got to get yourself out of it safely first. And I think that's what most players, um, they they try to make up for the trouble when they're in it, and that's usually gives them more trouble. It's real easy to turn a possible bogey into a triple by trying to be too cute, trying to get out of these situations. So you need to make sure, first of all, I think most of the time they don't take enough loft when they're trying to get out of these situations. You got to get the ball to get up in the air. So, they've got a distance to go and they're trying to equate the distance they're trying to hit it. And, as soon as they strike the ball, all they're doing is driving it further into the rough. They're not getting it up and out of it. So the first thing I would do is take some loft. So now you're looking at, okay, I'm not going to get to the green now, but that's okay. I drove it in here. Now I got to get it out of here. So I would take more loft. I would also tend to, in the regular thick roughs and thick grasses, I always like to tend to set the face a little bit more open. And that way the grass won't grab it as much. It tends to slide through the grass a little bit better when you start with it open. I know a lot of times they want to set it forward and de-loft it and try to hit down in there. And you've got to remember, when you hit down, the ball goes down. So you're just going to drive it further down into the stuff you're in. So I'd rather have them get it a little bit more open, almost to the certain point. With some of those roughs, they're playing it like a bunker shot. Get some loft, get the club up and down, try to get the club down into the grass and get it out of there with some pitch, so you can get it back into play. And in some of these tougher grasses, it's a little bit different. Sometimes I always like to say you sort of got to cut your way out of it. You got to take a club that's you know uh, 9, 8, 7, something still with pitch, but you sort of have to dig yourself and just cut the grass right out from underneath to try to get it out of there. You're not going to get much on the ball. The ball's buried too down deep in there. And so I would always try to take it, more like you're trying to hit even a buried lie shot. You're just going to take a club that's got some leading edge to it. Don't use the bounce at all, and really take a more steep or more upright type of swing, and really just try to cut the grass out from underneath the ball just to get your ball out of there. I think many times, anytime you're down in something, the swing needs to be more vertical versus shallow. It needs to be more up and down. So you need to be a little bit more arm oriented, get the club up in the air. Maybe not as much of a big of a turn in those types of situations, but get the club up so it'll go down, and that way you can create a steeper angle of attack to get the ball out of there. But again, I think more than anything else, you got to start with some loft, and you got to get yourself a chance to get the ball up and out of that stuff, and then get it down the fairway as safely as far as you can. For the most part, most of them are going to get to the green, and I think, Alex alluded to it with these professionals. I mean, in the shots they can hit, they're strong. They're a lot stronger than you think they are.
Oh, yeah.
And, I've got one of the guys that I coach that's 5'7", 150 pounds, and he can absolutely maul the ball. This kid is strong as anybody I've seen. And so, it takes some strength to drive the ball out of those deep grasses. So if they're struggling a little bit, then you just got to play it safe, get it back on the fairway, and actually put it in a distance where you're comfortable playing the next shot. I
Yep.
know a lot of times they'll drive it in the rough and then they'll hit it out in the fairway at a distance that they're not very good at. Well, that didn't help you at all. So kind of look where you're trying to go, and if you're going to hit this out of there and it's going to go 50 yards and it's going to give you a shot you're not looking at, then try to pitch it out to the side. Maybe you got a little longer swing that you're better at, a better distance that you're at, And I think in that case, now you've turned a negative into a little bit more of a positive on the next shot, something you're more comfortable with that can get you where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation there, because I think, again, even the pros will evaluate the situation first, take a look at it, and some of them will try to pull off a hero shot and try to whack through the grass, and you'll see the ball pop up, and it might go a few yards or it might not come out at all, depending on the situation. But for the most part, they're looking for exactly what you're saying. They're looking for, okay, where do I want my next shot to be played from? If you're 200 plus yards from the green, because you've pushed your drive to the right or to the left, and you're in thick rough, and you're not going to make that because the ball's sitting down. If it's sitting up, it's maybe sitting up on top of the grass a little bit. You might be able to get a hybrid or something on it, and be able to get that distance if you're a better player. But for the players that are not so good, look at, it might be only 50 yards you're going to advance. It might not even be that much, but it might be 20 yards to get it to a flat area that you're going to be able to get a good shot on and play your next shot. And as opposed to looking at maybe getting a double or triple bogey, you might come away with par, depending on if it's a par 4 or par 5. You might even come out with a bogey, which could be better than a triple or a double or a triple bogey. So you have to, sort of assess the situation and make an informed decision and look at, I'm only going to hit it 30, 40 yards, but I'm going to be putting myself in a much better position for my next shot. And that's really what you want to think about, is you want to think about where can I play my next shot from that I'm likely going to have a much higher percentage of success from. So I think that's a good observation. Alex, I'm going to come back to you on this one. And again, there's a lot of examples here, but I'm just going to give you one or two, and you're welcome to just take one and then elaborate a little bit on the other if you want. But shots from awkward lies. And what I'm talking about here is a lot of times we'll see the ball. We never see a flat fairway anymore. It's always the ball's above our feet, below our feet, uphill, downhill, whatever. All kinds of, rocking and rolling fairway lies that we can get. So talk about that. How do we set up for that? And you can give an example or two if you want, when you got the ball in an awkward lie. How do we handle that? It's not one of our bread and butter shots.
No, and again, it's one that's very difficult to practice. That's something that we run into basically all summer long. Our club up in Durango is about 7,500 feet, and outside of the tee box and the green, you don't have a flat lie. So I think you talking about a ball above your feet or below your feet, or an uphill lie or a downhill lie. I think one of the things straight away is, where amateurs make a mistake is they look for the distance first, and they're basing their distances off of a perfectly flat lie. And when you're dealing with an awkward lie, your balance is going to be compromised. It's going to be hard to be, make an aggressive swing. So you tend to see amateurs just under club first off. I think that's something to bear in mind, regardless of one of those 4 shots that you may face. Definitely take an extra club and just make sure that you're not sacrificing your balance. I think one of the common ones that you get is the ball above your feet. That's kind of a slicer's nightmare. When the ball's above your feet, the plane of the swing, we've got to make a flatter swing. It's almost like a merry-go-round. And if the ball's below your feet, it's going to be a little bit more like a Ferris wheel in terms of being a little bit steeper. With those situations there, if the ball's above your feet, obviously the ball's going to be closer to your chest, so we want to grip down the golf club a little bit. And we can kind of anticipate that the ball's going to go, if you're a right-handed golfer, it's going to go left. That heel tends to dig a little bit more into the ground and close the face, and that's why we have to kind of try and compensate when it comes to alignment. The ball a ball below your feet, that's just going to be the opposite, where now the toe is going to tend to want to kind of drag through the turf a little bit more, and we can anticipate that the ball can slice from that lie as well, and we have to adjust to those. I think it's key in both of those situations that you make practice swings. The plane can be so dramatic depending on how much the ball is above or below your feet, and those practice swings give you the chance, first off, to get the cognitive steps out of the way and all the thinking, but also try and figure out what the adjustment needs to be when it comes to changing your swing plane. I see the mistake most people make. They look at the yardage, they get up there, they may make a practice swing. It's probably not the most convincing practice swing they could make, and then they get up there and make a mistake. And I think it's key that in those situations you're making multiple swings for your practice swings. If you like the first one, maybe do it again. If you don't like the first one, do it again and then do it again. And that might kind of hold up play to some people, but if you hit a good shot, then you're going to play faster. So I think that's a thing to kind of bear in mind as well. In terms of like uphill or downhill, if we're going uphill, obviously we may have to take more than one club depending on how much of a slope that we're dealing with. And if we're going downhill, we may be able to kind of hit the club that the yardage is calling for, or you may be able to take a little bit less club there. In those two situations, that's where you're going to change ball position. You're not really going to change the plane of the swing, but when the ball's below your feet, you're going to find that the golf club bottoms out early. And so those practice swings are going to be key to make sure that you are finding where that low point of the swing is. And then obviously if the ball's, if you're on an uphill lie, the club tends to bottom out a little bit later. In that situation, I see a lot of people topping the ball just because of obviously falling back, depending on the slope as well. So I think the biggest key is going to be in all of those four situations, commit to a yardage, commit to a club, but just make sure that you're swinging, just not losing balance. I think balance is so key. And if you're not balanced, there's just no way that you can be aggressive and be consistent with your swing.
Yeah. And just add real quick, if you're at the driving range and you have a range that might have at one end or the other has a little bit of a slope to it, as long as you're not going to be interfering with anybody else, if you can get yourself in a position where you can put your ball, may not be as much as what you might be faced with on the golf course, but if you can have that ball a little above your feet or below, depending on the circumstance, hit a few shots like that. Practice wherever you can on the range, and obviously in a playing lesson with your pro. Insist on that. Say, hey, these are shots that I typically struggle with. Our next playing lesson, can we get out there? Can we work on some of those, work on the technique and work on some of the things that you just suggested? Because I think the more that you can practice it whenever possible, because you're not going to be faced with perfect shots out in the golf course. We know that it's just not realistic. But as we mentioned at the top of the segment, most of the ranges out there don't always have the perfect conditions to practice those long bunker shots or to practice the uphill, downhill, side hill lie or what have you. So you have to take advantage of those whenever possible. And if it's through a playing lesson, if you want to spend a little bit of time, make sure you talk to your golf instructor, or coach, or what have you, and say, these are some areas I'm really struggling with. So some great points there as well. Pete, this is another one that I think a lot of golfers really find themselves a lot more, especially in a lot of our tree line fairways. Golf courses, we see, places like Pinehurst, which may be a little more forgiving than some, but you get in there and somebody hits their shot and they're looking at, a potential pinball machine with these trees in front of them. And they think that they can thread that needle through, a couple of yards between two trees and think they're going to get it up there, up nice and close to the green. Even the pros will take a second look. There may be a little bit more adventurous. So walk us through that. Again, I know it's very similar with the others, as you might have to take your medicine, but if you're faced with a situation like that and you think you can put it through, what are some things that you have to factor in if you're going to play it through and out of the trees?
Well, one of the things John Jacobs used to say all the time, he said a double bogey's a bad shot followed by a dumb one. And so, you have to make sure that, you're in a situation that, it's not very good. And the first thing I would ask any player, if any shots you're going to try to pull off, is, have you done this before? And if you haven't done it before, then I wouldn't do it. If the ones on TV that you see pulling those shots, they've done that before because they're practicing those. And if you missed a fairway by 40 yards and now you're trying to hit it through a 6-foot space, I think you're going to struggle a little bit. So I would probably find my safest route back to the fairway and just take your lumps and put the ball back into that situation. But if you're going to try to do it, you have to look at, first of all, what space do you have? I mean, you might have some branches. Can you get the ball up in the air? Is it going to stay down? So that's going to dictate what loft you're going to take. Obviously, the lower lofted it is, the more offline you might hit it. So then if you've got to hit a 4-iron loft and you've got a 4-foot gap, then I probably wouldn't suggest to trying that. That's probably not in your favor to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
But a little bit more loft, you might have a better chance controlling where it goes. It'd be less likely to go more offline with the more pitch you have. Then again, is that going to get you far enough to where you can play a sensible next shot? But I think anytime you're messed into the trees, I think your best bet is to find the fairway, the quickest route, and just put it back over there. Those shots, you see those videos all the time where a guy tries to hit one and it comes right back at the camera. So, they just bounce it right off the tree and it comes right back at them. It's and it's one of those things that we're all trying to make the best of a situation, but the best thing you can do if you're trying to save your score is to get yourself back in play. You'll make a putt down the line you probably didn't think you would make, and that'll make up for the shot you just took back to the fairway. But once you get into trouble, you just got to get out of it. So those shots, trying to wind them through the trees, are tough to do unless you have some space. And again, if you've done it before, I mean, if you've practiced those shots before, that's fine. As a kid, I grew up in Kansas, so we hit it knee high to a toad all the time. So hitting it low out of something was easy to do because we had to keep it under the wind. So those are types of things that were practiced. And so
Right.
you're more likely to hit one low out of a situation like that and put it in between the trees. But, you got to have, as much as people don't want to hear it, you got to have some sensibility when you're out there. I mean, look at the level of player you are and, take that to heart and, just put yourself back where you need to be and play on from there. It's not always the greatest of situations, but again, as we always say, you hit it there. So now you got to deal with it.
Yeah. Great points. Speaking truth to power. The other thing too, I think that a lot of people have to consider is, when you're in these trees like that, you got to consider the lie. I mean, you don't know whether you're sitting up against a root, whether there's some pine cones in the area, and if the ball's sitting on top of straw, and you're now trying to get a footing on top of straw, you got to, you're slipping and sliding a little bit in your swing. So, you might think you've got an opening there, and then suddenly you take your backswing, swing through, and your foot slips a little bit. The next thing you know, you pulled it 5 yards offline, and you've hit 2 or 3 trees in the process. So there's a lot of things to consider. It's great to have those hero shots if you can pull them off, but you have to look at the percentage of likelihood that you're going to be able to pull that shot off. And if you're looking at 20-30% likelihood, that's not a shot you want to take. Take your medicine, hit it out in the fairway, and like you say, put yourself in a better position. So I agree with you on that. There's a time and a place for any of these shots. And the reason why I want to touch on this, these are shots, as you've probably gathered by now, these are shots that we're all facing at some point. I don't care how good of a player you are. Every once in a while, one of these shots is going to fall within your wheelhouse. And how you deal with them is really paramount. And I don't care what level of golfer you are, there's always, that point where you have to assess, okay, what am I looking at? What am I risk and reward here? Yeah, if I pull it off, I look great. But if I don't, I could be in worse shape. So you have to balance those pros and cons out. But some great points, Pete. Alex, this one's a fun one too. I'm sure you've been faced with this yourself and as many of your clients. But this is a shot from a bare lie. We see this a lot where somebody's come up with their second shot short. Some courses might have a very forgiving opening to the green where they might be able to putt it 20, 30 feet off of the green. Some might not be so forgiving because it's very undulating and very slopey, if you will. So they might be looking at hitting a chip from there or a short pitch shot, but it's off a very bare lie. And we see a lot of people chunking those shots, even from just 20, 30 feet or even a few yards off of the green. So give us a talk here. What do we need to do when we're dealing with the bare lie? And you might want to touch on a little bit, if you hadn't thought of it, about how the bounce of a golf club comes into play, because that's something that a lot of people don't know a lot about.
Yeah, you just kind of stole my thunder there. So one thing I do talk with my students. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So, no, I mean, I think most golfers carry at least 3 wedges, and one of the mistakes I see people make is all 3 wedges having the same bounce. So, you think about the leading edge, the front part of the bottom part of the club there, the sharpest part. The bounce is the back part of the sole, and you can get different degrees. And club fitters will talk to you about whether you're a digger or a picker, and they'll try and kind of fit you into a certain bounce. But I personally think it's important to have different types of bounce. Maybe have a sand wedge that has 10, 12 degrees of bounce, which is kind of about a mid to maybe slightly high bounce, and then maybe have a more lofted wedge, a 58 or a 60 with a low bounce. And whether you are a picker or a digger, I think having the option with those 2 different types of bounces gives you the chance to deal with different types of turf conditions. I think most people around the greens tend to use a 56 or some form of a sand wedge, and the sand wedge does have the most amount of bounce because in a bunker we don't want the club to dig. Well, off of a buried lie or you're hitting out of a wet bunker where there's no sand, having bounce is not really a great thing to have because the club literally will bounce. So depending on how much trajectory you need, if you need to fly the ball a bit higher and try and get the ball to maybe land a little bit quicker and get it to stop on the green, maybe that higher lofted low bounce wedge would be a better option. But if you do have some green to work with, go back to being old school like I was back in England, hitting 7-irons and 8-irons and 9-irons and just hitting bump and runs. Really, I think in those situations, you hear students make the comment that they struggle with distance control and things like that. A lot of times it's because they're focusing so much on the flag and the hole as they're making practice swings. And because our instincts react to what we see, we end up flying the ball way too close to the flag. So if there is an opportunity to use a less lofted club, then I think that's a better option for you. You just have to make sure that you're looking at your landing spots versus the hole itself. So that way you can account for the roll depending on what loft of club you're using. To me, I'm not a big fan of playing shots in the back of my stance. I feel like that can create a little bit too much shaft lean and expose that leading edge a little bit too much, and that's where that club can dig. So personally, I like to try and see students play the ball a bit more in the center of the stance, create a shaft lean with a body. And what I mean by that is if you set up with your weight 50-50 and then lean your weight to your front foot, just let the butt end of the club follow your sternum. So you're creating shaft lean as it relates to your body, but you're just not creating too much shaft lean. I think most people get their hands way too far forward and they just kind of shove that club into the ground and just get stuck way too much. And also, with those smaller swings, you're trying to mimic what your body would be doing as if you were making a full swing, but at that very specific point of the swing. I see a lot of students on those smaller swings, there's no body rotation through impact. Their arms and hands are just out racing the body, and we tend to hit a lot of thin or bladed shots. So it's important that, again, we are mimicking the same movement that you'd be making as if you were making a full swing, but obviously at a very small size. But yeah, I think club selection's big. Bounce is huge. I think it's really important, going back and talking to your local pro or your instructor, just talk about different bounces and try not to make the mistake, I personally think anyway, of just having clubs that have all the same bounces when it comes to your wedges.
Yeah, it's a great point, and you're exactly right. I see so many people, practicing these shots, at the driving range, and they'll be around the practice green, and they'll have a wedge with a very high bounce, and they're just skipping off and blading the shot over the green every time. And I said, why are you playing with a sand wedge with such a predominant bounce? And they say, well, because I'm trying to get some height. But I said, but you're playing off a tight lie. You're not cutting through the grass. You're not in a thick rough or something along that where you need to get down a little bit under the ball. You're playing off a very tight lie, in a simulated fairway, if you will, and you're playing with a high bounce club, and you need to be looking at something different. And I always try to encourage, like you said, I always try to encourage them to maybe do a little bit old school and do that 7, 8, 9 hour and do a bump and run and go that route as opposed to trying to fly it up, because 9 times out of 10, most amateurs are going to struggle. They're going to chunk it. They're going to play the ball way too far back. They're going to get that shaft leaning way up. And the next thing you know, that leading edge is digging in about an inch or so behind the ball, because as they're moving through and transitioning their body, that club is just going down. All you hear is this thump, and I hear it every single time when I see somebody doing that. So yeah, you raise some great points, and it's all really a matter of preparation. Any golf shot, I don't care what shot it is, it's how you prepare for that shot. You have to analyze it, you have to look at it, and you have to use a little bit of common sense. But if you're not somebody that practices a lot, it's very easy to fall into those traps that we see so often. And that's why I think it's important to work with a professional, get the foundation set up, and then go out and practice those shots and do it. Once you have the technique, once you understand how to do it, it becomes very easy. But if you don't know how to do it and you're just making the same mistakes every time, then nothing's going to change. So you have to really learn how to do these shots correctly and how to be able to execute them properly. and then just go out and work on that. Spend a little bit of time, get the feel down, get the the rhythm down, if you will, and then you're going to be able to be a little bit more successful out in the golf course. And we're all, as I said, faced with these hard shots, and hopefully you're not going to have them too much, but you need to understand what you need to do when you are faced with them and do it properly. So some excellent points that you raised. And Pete, the last one I'm going to give for you, we've all had hit that dreaded shank, if you will. It's not really a tough shot physically. I mean, it happens. You can talk a little bit about what causes it if you want. But mentally, it becomes a bit of a hurdle, because once you've done it, some golfers up there start making a lot of adjustments in their swing in order to compensate. They think they know what caused it. So I want you to touch on what typically causes a shank and what a golfer really needs to be doing if they want to avoid that, to get past that mental hurdle.
Yeah, that's a tough one to overcome. And you see it quite often, and it can be done from each direction. Depending on where the hands move, a lot of them will come so far over it on the outside and get the hands pitched out away from them, so they're coming on the outside. They're going to put the heel right on it, and some of them will come underneath it so much that their hands will move so far away from them, they'll hit it off the heel from the inside. They can do it from both directions. So it's not that it's some would say, oh, it's only one thing that does it. And those people that used to say a shank is only, a quarter of an inch away from a great shot. Well, that's well to be said, but, they missed it in the wrong quarter of the club. So, I think one of the things you can do is, if you're somebody who's been up against that, is I like to have them set up to it at address. And then what I'll do is I'll put another ball to the inside of that ball. And then I'll say, stay where you are, but then I want you to hit the one on the inside, just so they can see that they can move the club a little bit closer to them, just to get a little visual of what they're trying to do, so they can move it towards, it's going to be towards the toe versus toward the heel. Just something visual that they can do to see. You can put a tee down and, try to make sure that they hit the tee versus the ball, put a tee to the inside, and, just to give them a different picture. And I think that sometimes can help them get over the hurdle mentally of what they're trying to do. But it's funny you brought that up, because I had a gentleman that came just the other day, and I said, how you hitting? He says, man, I've been hitting it great. And then I just watched him hit laterals for about 10 minutes. And I just sat there and watched him. And he said, aren't you going to say anything? I said, no, I'm enjoying watching you, try to struggle to get it out of this. I'm trying to watch what you're doing and seeing in your mind, how are you trying to get out of this? And, he was so far outside. So the more left he tried to swing, the more outside he went, the worse it got. And so finally, I just stopped him and said, hey, let's explain to you what's going on here.
Sure.
So I wasn't trying to make him feel too miserable, but I was just trying to see how
Yeah,
he
you
would
were.
go about trying to
Yeah,
fix it.
you were.
It was kind of fun. So, and the crazy thing is, he's a pretty good player. So, it happens. It happens to all of us.
Oh, yeah.
This guy's about a 7 handicap, and here he is hitting laterals for 10 minutes. And it's just, it's just something that comes in there. But I think more importantly, it's understanding the concept of what you do. And I think that all boils down to the overall instruction anyway. We always try to get everybody to understand, what they do and why they do the things they do. So when situations like this come up, they're more educated on their own movements, and they have a chance to work themselves back out of it. But it's it's a tough one. I mean, mentally, it's hard to get away from that. It's also the one, when you've got the big slicers and the balls keep going to the right, and they just, no matter what they do, you set them up at address and they aim 50 yards left. I mean, it's just in there. I mean, they're so used to reacting to what they see. And so I think, especially when somebody's been hitting them off the heel like that, a little bit of understanding as to why, a little bit of understanding their own swing and how that can cause that. And then from there, trying to direct them back with just some little visual changes. And sometimes that's really all it is. All I really did with this guy is I had him set up to it, and then I just stuck a tee an inch inside the ball. And I said, all I want you to do is hit the tee. And the first one, he hit it right in the middle of the club face.
Yep.
And he just looked at me and he goes, it can't be that easy. And I said, sometimes it is. It's just a little bit different visual of what you're trying to do. But I said, in your mind, the way you were trying to fix it was the opposite of what you needed to do. So the further you went outside, the worse it got. So I said, we just have to give you a visual of what you're trying to do, and get this club back on the ball. And then sometimes I like to just take a practice swing to the top, stop. And then I said, now in slow motion, just put it back where the ball is. Where's the middle of the face?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? And sometimes it's that easy for them to do. It's just giving them a chance to to do something and get it right. And if you're really struggling and you got nobody to help you, put the irons away, grab a wood that doesn't have as much of a heel, hit some shots to get used to not hitting it on a lateral, get yourself some confidence back, and then go back and grab an iron and go back to it. So, yeah, it's not one of the fun ones, the old shankopotamus. Nobody likes that one, but it's just something that you have to deal with. And like I said, you can do it from both directions, but it's just getting a little understanding of what you do and what the cause of that can be, and then being able to get your club back into a neutral position so you can get it back in the center of the face.
Yeah, it always used to kill me when I would be up at some of the local short ranges and I would see, and this is before they had the dividers between the tee eras, and you get some guy behind you, it's shanking and hit your heel or something, or in the back of the leg, And it's like, man, come on. If you're going to do that, get on the other side of the ring. You know what I mean? But anyways, it is what it is. All right. Yeah. Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you, as always, for bringing your best to the Coach's Corner discussion here on Golf Talk Live. It's always a pleasure to have both of you. I'm going to give you just a quick moment, if you don't mind, to let the folks know how they can reach out to you. And if there's anything special you want to plug, go ahead and do that. So, Alex, I'm going to come back to you. You go first, and Pete, you can follow up.
Yeah, well, hey, Ted, thanks again for this. I really enjoyed the subject stuff we talked today about. I think next week we've got a big tournament coming up, which is going to really kind of expose all those shots that we talked about, the Ryder Cup. And as a gratuitous plug, I'm going to be there next week to watch it. So it's going to be kind of cool, and take in Mary, my son Max, and Lucy there, and going to have a great time in New York. And I haven't quite decided yet who I'm rooting for. Yeah, I've lived longer in the US than I did the UK, and I'm keeping my wife guessing. So I've been to 2 other Ryder Cups, and I'm just going to keep her guessing. But no, thanks for let me be on the show today. As you mentioned earlier, I just got back from Colorado last night. Started back at the JW Marriott Camelback Inn here in Scottsdale. Starting straight away teaching tomorrow, and we have some really cool stuff going on, not just private instruction. We're doing golf schools. We're doing some player development programs for women as well. And we've got a really kind of a robust junior program that we started about 6 years ago without really promoting it. And it's just kind of taken off really, really well. And I've had some really nice success stories with that. But all that information you can find online at alexfisherpga.com. And there you can even submit a contact form there, and I promise I'll get back to you within 24 hours. And would just love to help any of your listeners out there with anything they're looking to do with their golf game.
Well, fantastic. Thank you always, Alex, for coming on. And just a quick side note on the Ryder Cup: if you and Mary pick one of the other, you're sure not to lose. So one can pick Europe, one can pick the U.S., and you're guaranteed somebody in the family is going to be a winner. Pete, go ahead.
Well, again, Ted, thanks for having me on. Alex, it's great being with you this evening. It was a fun topics to go over, and maybe I'll run into you. I'll be at the Ryder Cup next week too, so hopefully I'll run into you. They can reach me at PeteBuchananGolf.com. All of my information's out there, and there's a contact form there. And as I always say, Ted, I say it every time, let's just start a conversation. Just send me a message. Give me your contact info, and I can reach out to you, and let's just talk about your golf game and see where we can take it. I do a lot of online lessons, and we can work with guys all over the world. So it's really easy with today's technology, to be able to capture and watch and go live and watch what you're doing. So it's real simple, but it all starts with conversation first. So just reach out and, let me know what's going on, and we'll go from there. We got some things down the road that are coming up. As I said before, I'm a brand ambassador for XView, and they're working behind the scenes. There's a lot of things that are coming with that app. So if you haven't seen it before, don't hesitate to going down. The free versions out there that you can go get. But we're really working to bring this thing to the forefront, and I think you're going to see a lot of cool things coming out of that. So AI and a bunch of stuff behind the scenes we're working on. It should be pretty interesting coming up in 26.
welcome back, everybody. I'm excited to be joined by this evening's special featured guest, Joe Pilcavage. He is the VP of Marketing at Blue Tees Golf. Joe is an award-winning creative leader who's spent the last 15 plus years turning bold ideas into business results. And as the VP of Marketing at Blue Tees Golf, one of the fastest growing golf technology brands in the world, Joe is helping redefine what a modern golf brand can be, leading creative brand and growth strategy across physical and digital product experiences. So, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ted.
Well,
Glad to be here.
I appreciate it. I've obviously had you guys on the show before, meaning Blue Tees, and you guys are definitely a great company. But what I want to do is if we can start, two things I want to do. First off, I want to talk a little bit about you, besides obviously the intro that we just did, and what your interest in golf, when your first early memories of golf were for you, if you played, and when you got started. And then we'll talk a little bit about sort of the history of Blue Tees.
Sure. Sounds great. So I guess we're going to jump right in and talk about golf, huh?
Yeah.
It's funny. I think for me, probably not unlike a lot of guys my age. I think golf was one of those things that I was introduced to from my dad. Right, it was one of those bonding activities we would do every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I had played all sorts of sports growing up as a kid. I did baseball and soccer and track, and there was something about golf that was just a little bit different. Right, it was a little bit of a change of pace. It was something that we can have a conversation around together. Right, really start to remember some of those moments, which you don't necessarily get when you're in the thrill of the moment in a fast-paced, competitive sport or a team sport, if you will. So, I think it started there, early on, and then from there just kind of dripped throughout the rest of my life, getting involved in tournaments through work and playing with friends here and there, and lo and behold, I find myself working in it years later.
Now, did you ever imagine when you look back now that you would be working for a golf company? Did you ever envision that as you were growing up in your earlier days, and you were going to school and studying for for your education? Did you ever imagine yourself being in the golf business?
Truthfully, not at all. I think for me, I grew up in probably the first generation of the the internet dwellers, if you will.
Sure.
Right, I grew up with video games, Nintendo, all these things, and I was always in my own mind destined to be the world's biggest gamer, or a game developer. And there was something about I think translating that into just the digital medium and technology that sort of kept me in it. And I think one thing led to another, and then looking at something like sports tech or just technology in golf does have appeal to me. So I think there was a natural progression that sort of got me there. But yeah, if you asked my my 13-year-old or 16-year-old self, I would have probably laughed at you.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously I'm a lot older than you are, and but I grew up very similar in the sense that my father was the one that introduced me to the game. He took me to the first driving range, the first golf course, and we played, and he taught me the game. And then my earlier memory was I wanted to battle out Nicholas and Palmer, and all those guys were still prominent, and for me it was like, I want to get out there and play with these guys. I remember watching Nicholas in the the 70s, and just being in awe, and of course Arnie's Army, that was just it just blew me away. And then there was so many others, I mean, go down the whole list, but that was my first. And when I came to the realization that was not going to happen, the next best thing for me was to teach the game. So I've been teaching for 32 plus years. So I thought, well, I'm going to do the next best thing. So I always had golf kind of in my blood, but I just not to the degree I wanted it. But I'm just as happy with what I'm doing. So I want to fast forward a little bit, and I want to talk about Blue Tees in the sense, what is the history of Blue Tees? Give us a little bit of idea how it got started, sort of who came up with the idea, and why do you think they felt in such a competitive market, especially with technology, that they thought, hey, this is something we want. We want to, tackle the beast head on.
That's a great question, Ted. And it's actually one of my favorite aspects of the brand, and truthfully what drew me to it in the first place. Blue Tees got started, a few short years ago, call it 4.5 years. And really it was born out of 5 co-founders, childhood friends. They grew up playing the game, stayed close together. And a couple of years ago, they were playing, and the thesis came up that it's like, you know what? Why should we have to pay a premium price tag, north of $500 for golf tech? Or on the other side of that, go on a marketplace, pick your marketplace of choice and, find something that arguably falls apart after a couple of uses, or you drop it
Mhm.
once and that's it.
Yep.
And, I think that was sort of the catalyst for the brand and the business. And, they looked at their collective skill sets across the board and said, you know what, we can do better. Right. We are golfers ourselves. We love the game. We know what we want as players. So let's go for it. And, from there, launched the first rangefinder under the Blue Tees banner. And
Mhm.
then, one thing led to the next. Launched a GPS speaker, became, market leader in speakers, and have since moved on to a whole sort of other products in the portfolio, wearables, handhelds, and, some other stuff too. So really, really fascinating story to be able to look at a category and say, there's definitely an opportunity here that we can try to do better for ourselves, and know that there's so many others like us. Right, there's a whole new generation of golfers who, they care about the style and the aesthetic. They care about finding affordable, high performance technology that's easy to use and, looks good. So I think it, sort of becomes a natural extension of yourself, and what's in your bag. So that's sort of the long and short of the story.
It's really interesting. I did just a very quick side story. So just a few years ago, while you guys were up and coming in the market, I had acquired a couple of competitor rangefinders, and certainly good in their own right. And I remember I had an extra one, and I had reached out to somebody that I knew that was a golfer, and I said, "Hey, I've got this rangefinder, and just throw me a couple of bucks, and we'll call it even," type of thing. And the first thing out of their mouth, "Is it Blue Tee?" It was a young guy. He says, "Is it Blue Tees?" I said, "No, I'm not going to name the name," but I said it was one of the competitors, of course. No, never mind. And so that was a testament to your brand. I mean, you guys were only in the market a little while, and the guy, and this was one of the major competitors, and he just said, "No, that's okay." He said, and it was a good deal. So, I mean, it just goes to, you guys have done such a great job, not just, with the technology and how far it's come from its earlier days, but how you've positioned yourselves. I know I've talked to other representatives from, some of the founders and whatnot from Blue Tees. And, one of the things that they're really proud about, obviously, is the fact that the technology is great. It's always, growing, it's always developing and that. But the fact that it was important for you guys to position yourself in the market in such a way that you wanted to make it affordable, because and I'm going to be bluntly honest here, the generations coming up are cheap when it comes to spending their money. I mean, my generation, hey, if it was $500, $600, yeah, okay, you cut the check and, the credit card comes out, whatever. But you guys are much more frugal. I mean, you'll pay for good technology, but you also recognize that it has to be, the price point is very, very important. You're much more diligent about that than I think some of the older generations, and I give you a lot of props for that. And it's a very smart thing that you guys did, is you positioned yourself. It's not that you're dumping the stuff on the market dirt cheap or anything like that. You said, okay, there is a need in this market, there is a big need for this market, and we're going to position ourselves in such a way that we're not only going to come out and compete head to head with the big boys with this product, but we're going to create a price point that people won't even bat an eyelash at and say, okay, you know what, this is worth it. The technology is great, and I can afford this, so I can be part of that group as well. And that was very, very smart on your team. And I want to get your thoughts on that. Was that really something in the forefront of the mind when you guys were creating all of this?
Absolutely. And thanks for that. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right, Ted. I think the entire brand was built around that sweet spot in the marketplace, right? How do you create something that's affordable, but has a great experience tied to it?
Right.
Because that's what, the audience is looking for. As we like to think about it, built to perform, price to play. And I think that's sort of how we tend to operate, and how we really think about our entire portfolio, and where we want to play in the market. How do we continue to push the bar for what a good experience or a good piece of technology looks like and feels like, without ever having to compromise on the price point. And I think that's definitely been the underlying magic of the brand from a positioning perspective. And I'm so excited to see just us continuing to double down on that year after year after year.
Yeah, and it served you guys well. I mean, you guys went from one position to, in the top positions. I mean, you guys, and I don't look at the stats right now, but I think you're in around like within certainly the top three. I think you're number 2, if I'm not mistaken, in the top. So I mean, that is an incredible feat for a company that's only been out in the market for a few years to be able to come up and raise the ranks, because there's so much, as you know, so much competition now. But what I wanted to also, sort of pick your brains on is you come in with a great product. You're always looking to improve that product, but you're looking to do it in such a way that what is it that the client really wants? What are they going to use? I mean, it's like cars. You can add a bunch of features in there, but half the stuff nobody ever uses, and they're paying for it. You guys were very methodical. So how much and how important was it to get a good feedback from your clientele? So how much research is R&D from your standpoint, and how much of it, let's reach out to our customers and find out what is it they really want?
It's wildly important. And I love that you brought that up. Right. I think that's part of the magic of our product development process is, like I mentioned before, right, we're building for ourselves as players first and
Sure.
foremost. So it's always great to have just that point of view, right, where we know what we want, we know what we use, and features that we don't need or wouldn't want or don't need.
Right.
So I think it starts there. But we're very fortunate to be able to have a really great network and a community to be able to tap. So there's players within our community of all different formats, right? Some people are rangefinder users, some people don't care, right, and they'd rather a handheld. Right. So you start to get perspective from all different use cases, all different preferences. We have some amazing retail partners as well, folks that work in the pro shops. They hear from their customers what they're invested in and looking for, all the way up to some of our ambassadors and partners like, Sean Foley, former coach of Tiger Woods, right, who is used to coaching the best of the best, right, and what they're looking for and what features and data ultimately matter. And it becomes this really great sort of melting pot of all of these various data points, and looking at that and saying, okay, what do we do with this, right? What how do you have discipline to say, well, we don't actually need these 17 features that someone else is looking to launch, because really players just want one thing, or they just want those two things. So for us, it's looking at those and say, let's give them the best experience they can around that. And then, anything else is extra value add, or, we can think about how it comes to life somewhere else.
I remember when you guys first brought out your speaker, and I thought to myself, yeah, this is cool, but I grew up obviously in the generation where it was like shh out in the golf course, and I'm not saying that this, people are blasting it at the top, but I'm sure there are a few, but and I thought to myself, okay, this is cute, this is catchy, it's a big seller. You guys moved really big into this market. What is it? I mean, what do you see the change in the market compared to, say, and I'm going to throw myself under the bus, and I'm in my 60s, so that gives you an idea of what generation I'm from. What is it about your generation that, is it about just having more fun out in the golf course, not taking yourself so serious? And that doesn't mean you guys don't want to be competitive, and doesn't mean you don't want to play your best out there, but is it more about just, hey, let's have some fun? If we're going to be here for 4 hours, damn, we're going to have some fun while we're out here. Is that really what the thought process behind something like your speaker is about?
For sure. I think that's a huge part of it. I'd like to say that, although the soul of the game is the same, I think golf is changing. Right? I think golf more than ever has become more social, more expressive, more personalized. And you see a lot of different aspects and a lot of different various forms of the categories surrounding it that have led that. Things like Top Golf, things like, launch monitors, being able to play off the course, do sim in your own garage or your own basement. Right. So, for us, and definitely, my generation, our generation, ones that come after me, we see that, right? We see people care about their group chats and their playlists and the vibe just as much as they care about their scores, right? If not more, right? And I think a product like the speaker is, a great opportunity to serve both sides of that. So, there's something for everybody, right? Whether you're out for just a good time and you want to, have 4 hours of great experience with friends and not think about anything else, or you're like really trying to lower your handicap and you're really just trying to be the best you can, and it's a sense of personal accomplishment, or maybe even a little gloating or boasting in your your friend circle, we've got something for you. We sort of have you covered there.
Yeah, and they're very, I mean, I've seen a lot of speakers on the market, and it's definitely among the sharpest looking one out there. So you guys did a great job, and your design team in that. I want to move into some of the other stuff that you guys have. Earlier in April, you guys launched the Playmaker Plus. That is the first swing-friendly golf GPS golf watch. Tell us about that. That's, again, another great component that you guys have come out in the market, and it's very well price pointed as well. Very affordable for anybody to really get into the market. But tell us about that, because that's a big deal as well.
For sure. Yeah, this year's been a great year for, across the board for just going a little bit wider in our portfolio. Definitely the Playmaker Plus is a good example of that. Right? This is the first product we're putting in the wearable category, and another example of building for ourselves. And I think one of the things we saw from a lot of consumers and a lot of our community, and just in general, people tend to have this hesitation around wearing a watch while they play because it impedes your swing. Right? If the face is too big, sometimes it's weighty. So, you take it off, you throw it in your bag, or, you find a way around it. So for us, we think about the watch experience for us, first and foremost, it's like, let's make something that people want to wear. Right. Yeah. So the weight factor and the form factor of, the industrial design was principle number one. How do we make it feel great? And some of the early feedback we actually got, and it was like, I forgot it was on my wrist in the first place, which right. For us is a great indicator that we're heading in the right direction. Secondly, from there, then take a lot of the foundational work and the data and the experience that we've already created through some of the other products and say, how do we make that a great experience on the watch? So, you could very quickly track your shots, you get your distances, you can navigate to different greens, you're seeing the green, all of those things, whether it's weather, it's sort of at your disposal without having to pull out your phone. Also, which is another big factor for people, right? They don't want to be that guy that has to go and pull out your phone while you're playing and sort of takes you out of the headspace. So I think that's sort of where we landed with the watch, and it's so far so good as far as just being able to play with it, and a lot of the feedback we've gotten from from the community, and I think since we've launched it, we've learned a lot as well, and we've continued to just invest in doubling down on how we make it even better and better and better. And, we're constantly ear to the ground, listening to how players are using it, what feedback they're having, even things you can't predict, right? The way people are using it and, their movements on the course. So the team's been awesome at really just incorporating feedback as we go and just constantly rolling out new releases to make it as good as it possibly can be.
What's interesting about it too, Joe, is that, the one thing I found, and I give credit to your generation, is time is a much more important commodity to your generation than mine. I mean, hey, if we could get 4.5, 5 hours out in a golf course, we were happy to get away from home and, whatever. But you guys have so many other things, and my generation is now too, of course, but just with the way times are. But what I've found is that, I've talked to a lot of young guys over the years, not only teaching the game, but just around the game. And one of the things that was important is I've got other things in my life that I want to do. I don't want to be able to just be out on the golf course all the time. I want to play, yes, but I mean, I've got other things, other activities, friends, whatever it is I want to do. Do you think that one of the benefits of having that watch is that I can get the information I need quickly, I can get the shot, and I can get my round done? Not that it's speeding you up, but it's helping with slow play a little bit, because you're not having to fumble around, like you said, with some other device, or check this out, or wait for that, or see how the crow flies, or whatever the case is. That this technology is really helping the younger generation enjoy something, be able to do it in a quick manner, so that they can get on to other things and other things that they may enjoy as well. Is that part of the sort of, and the reason I ask that is I'm really trying to pick your brains as a young man to think about, is that's really what's going on at Blue Tees, is you're trying to find a way to make the game fun, affordable, but at the same time, respecting the fact that people have other things besides golf they may want to do.
Totally, Ted. And you hit the nail on the head with that. Right. I think one of our core values as a team is keep it fun. Right. Yeah. We're in this because we love the game. Right. And we love everything that comes with playing. And I think, there's this constant battle of too much data, too much technicality versus just out for the enjoyment piece of it. So, we're always trying to figure out, how do you create a better experience for somebody and optimize it. And yeah, pace of play is definitely a concern,
Sure.
right? To some people,
Yep.
whether you're on a crowded course, every tee time is booked, you have this constant need and you feel a little bit of pressure. But yeah, the other side of it is we may have 5 other things going on that same day. How do you sneak in, 3 hours, 4 hours, and not burn the whole day? So, I think really for us, the underlying design philosophy of that is how do you just take as much friction out of it and just let people enjoy the game
Yeah.
or enjoy more conversations and not be constantly like pulling out a device or fumbling or navigating everything else besides thinking about their next shot.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a big piece of it, especially as we look at even just what's to come in the portfolio.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, you've got some great products. You're always, as I said, very innovative with your updates, and that brings me to, midsummer. You did some updates with your major updates actually with your Ringer GPS handheld. That's I mean, we're switching gears here a little bit, but talk about that. What are some of the new features that have changed from the original Ringer that's come out? And you guys have to be pretty excited about that. I mean, this is another launch that you guys have done this season.
Yeah, wildly excited. So, I think the Ringer is a really great product that, can often be maybe overshadowed a little bit by the coolness or the vibe of the speaker. But, what we found is that, as a handheld, there was just so much opportunity to continue to optimize just the way people used it. So for us, and it's not even a new product, right? Where this was a free firmware update to anyone who already owned one. So we were able to build on an already awesome device and make it even better based on some of the feedback we were hearing. So things like taking the display of it and putting it in full color, right? Creating a lot more of a vibrant read when you might be out on a sunny day and you want to be able to look at your green view and see those distances in the shape of a green. So that was one piece of it. Another piece of it was shot tracking, right? Shot tracking is one of those things that can be a great thing or a miserable thing, depending
Right.
on just if you have to keep up with it and remember to track shots. So we wanted to make that experience much easier. We increased the amount of shots that you can track, per hole. I think we moved from about 4 to 10. So, caters to golfers like me. Not telling you
Right.
my handicap is, but it certainly helps. Things just like connectivity, the overall user experience, wanting to make sure that it's just lightning fast. And to my previous point, it's like, how do you take any additional swipes, taps, clicks, whatever it is out of the experience and just let people play the game, get their data quickly and just keep going. And I'd say the last big piece of this was really connecting it in a much bigger way to our analytics platform and our game app experience. So really being able to take all the data that you're seeing or playing throughout a round and capture that in a way that you can go look at later, right? And say like, how did I do? How am I doing, right? Over the course of X amount of weeks or months, am I shooting lower scores? Am I doing better? Am I doing worse in some cases? So really just wanted to start moving one step closer to the bigger picture for us. And that's really connecting and building just a super powerful ecosystem when it comes to all golf tech.
And you raise a couple of really interesting points, because from a coach's perspective, one of the things that we want to be able to do is to understand better when it comes to our players, the data points. What are they doing? How are they actually doing it? It's one thing to have a conversation, say, well, yeah, I didn't, I kind of sucked last Saturday. But if I can understand, how their short game is really doing, how many shots that's, they're taking and how many putts they're making and not making, and how many greens they're hitting, this sort of thing. When I can get a little bit of information, from that, these data points become valuable as a coach, because then I can tailor make what I need to do, make adjustments, and get them in the right path, as opposed to spending, lesson after lesson going down a rabbit hole that maybe they don't need to make changes in. So it becomes very valuable for the teaching side of the game as well as the end user. And then the other thing, too, which is unique, is, again, you touched on this and you made a really great point. One of the things, and I hate this myself, is if you've got to spend 3 or 4 minutes going through 1,000 screens to get to what you want, that's a pain in the what. So if you can simplify that process, because that's a game changer right there in itself. If I've got to go through 10,000 screens to get to what I want, I don't want it. I'm putting it down. It's not,
Right.
you know what I mean? The more user friendly, the quicker the pace. that sort of thing. So that's something, and I like the fact that that is something that you guys really paid attention to. And I understand that technology changes, when they first come out, they're a little bit different, but it sounds like you guys are really in the forefront of that. And it brings me to this. You guys participated in the PGA Summit this August, and you had the launch of Tips. Tell us what Tips is and why you guys did that and why it's creating so much buzz.
Sure. So yeah, Tips another new addition to our family of brands here, right? Obviously starting in really affordable premium golf tech. For us, really thinking about where else can we add value to a golfer's life, and we talked about the value of the modern golfer's social circles, and they're doing more, right? There's often more than just a 9 or an 18 on the course, right? There's the weekend golf trips, there's bachelor party weekends, there's all sorts of other tournaments and events, and honestly, these people are just doing more in their everyday life. They may be going from work to the gym to then playing around, right? So for us, we saw this opportunity to really just build on what we had already been offering to the market, and launching a new soft goods brand that can meet golfers where they're at and give them a little bit more, but go even wider than that, right? So for us, Tips is really this line that's inspired, same philosophy of Blue Tees as the parent brand, but really it's all about minimalist travel gear built for life on the go,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we're offering things in our first collection here. We have 8 pieces in the collection. Sure, things like shoe bags or valuables pouches to be able to store maybe your Apple Watch or your wallet or your keys. Throw it in your golf bag, but we have two different styles of backpacks that are great for carry-ons, or just for everyday use. We have the commuter sling to be able to take to the gym or use for maybe an extra shirt or anything else you want to throw in there. We have a duffel bag, perfect for the weekend getaway.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of pieces just really trying to build on just the everyday life of modern golfers beyond just life on the course. So that's the where Tips is, and where it sits, and so far the reception's been really positive. We're super excited. It's just the beginning for us, and also definitely for a lot of our other partners, what we've been hearing is it makes great gifts from a promo side of things. So
Sure.
we do offer the ability to custom brand the products as well, which is great for tournaments, great for gift giving. So just seem to really round out our portfolio a little bit more than just the technology piece as an overarching brand.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, what it sounds like to me is what you're really trying to do here is to, as many people in the clothing and accessory end of the industry, is trying to make it so that it's not just necessarily geared for golf, but it becomes part of a lifestyle brand as well. So that they can use this for the pieces. Yeah, they might be great for on the golf course, but if they want to use it for other things as well, there's a lot of crossover, and that's important too, because you don't want to, like with golf clothing. I mean, I know growing up in that, when you had golf clothing, it was a typical polo shirt, things like that, and you could tell it was a golf shirt. You didn't wear it out anywhere except for at the golf course. Now a lot of brands coming out are, yeah, you can wear it in the golf course. It's still kind of some of them polo style, but it's also, especially in the women's market, it's interchangeable with other clothing. So people don't even know that you're out in the golf course. It becomes part of their lifestyle brand. And it sounds to me, really, that's what Tips is trying to do, is to create, and I could be wrong, but it sounds like that to me is what you're trying to do is not only incorporate the versatility of what it does for your existing brand, but also gives them an opportunity to extend it out into other areas of their life. Would that be accurate?
Exactly, Ted. And I think you nailed it, right? The lifestyle piece of it is so integral to just how a lot of folks that are modern golfers and my generation thinks about it, right? Like, I am wearing my golf shirt to work every day, not just because I work in golf, but
Right.
because it's comfortable, right? That's athleisure, right? So I think the more we start to integrate that into other aspects of our life, the more we feel empowered to just keep connecting those dots, and we want to keep playing, we want to keep going, we want to associate with others and be able to quickly hit the gym together, or they'll go play the back nine somewhere between meetings. So I think, to your point, yeah, it's certainly a lifestyle, and I think the more we can embrace that and just meet our community and our audiences where they're at in every which way, I think it's a win for everybody.
Yeah, and it really says a lot to the versatility of your company, because it looks at, okay, they're not just building this, they're not just making that. That's great, but what happens if I don't do this? And it's something that even those that are not quite yet diehard golfers, they can say, I can relate to this. I can use these products, even if I'm not I may not be into the technology right now because I'm not really playing golf much, but tips is something that, hey, I can get into, and my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case may be, we can use these together when we go on a trip. So again, it goes into that lifestyle thing. What I want to ask you, which is interesting, and speaking of as we look at upcoming generations, Nat, are you seeing through your own research a big uptick in female golfers coming to Blue Tees? I mean, obviously, first starting out, I'm sure it was predominantly male, but I imagine you're seeing a lot of young female golfers coming up through the mix as well. Are you seeing an uptick since you guys started, as the rest of the industry is on your side of things as well?
1000%. And, I think it's no secret when you look across all sorts of studies and just across the golf landscape in general, we're seeing an uptick in, female golfers. And, for us, it's really exciting as a brand because, we are philosophically for everyone, right? We want to be for the weekend warriors. We want to
Sure.
be for the casual golfers as much as the people chasing lower scores. So, as a marketer, right, I get really excited to see the diversity of perspective and of play, of skill levels, of genders, of regions and territories, and how they view golf as a game, and all the pieces of that. So for us, yeah, we're seeing it too, and it's exciting. And
Yeah.
we want to continue to double down on that and just reach our community and meet them where they're at, and through activations, through experiences, through content that they can look at the brand and say, yeah, that's me. Right. And I think that's what resonates, and that's what continues to grow the community. And it becomes a really great flywheel of sorts for us.
Yeah, and that is important, and especially from not just marketing, but just from a brand itself, is you want to know that you're not just reaching. This is the mistake with a lot of companies, is they just sort of pigeonhole themselves into, we're going to just go after this group here, and you have to be able to be more diverse in your thinking, because if you want, and I hate to always use this as an example, but if you go back a few years ago, we all went through COVID. It was very difficult for a lot of people, some extremely difficult. But what it did for our industry is it really woke up the industry and said, you know what? Because we were very fortunate in the sense that people were able to go out and play golf, unlike many other industries that didn't have those same opportunities to be open or be taken advantage of. Golf really had sort of a second breath of air, because it not only were we able to get out and play for us diehard golfers, but it was able to introduce golf to a generation of people that didn't grow up like you did, where your dad introduced you, and that didn't know how to hold a golf club, but wanted just to get the heck out of the house and be able to do something. Say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go up to the range. Let's go up to the range, or let's go and play 9 holes. So it really introduced the game to people that had never had an introduction before. And that's exciting, especially for somebody like you guys, because it opened up a market that was never there before and gave you an opportunity to listen and say, what would you like? If you're going to come and play this game, how would you like your experience to be? And that, as a marketer, has to be pretty exciting. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you constantly need to be in tune to the cultural zeitgeist, if you will, right? And
Right.
I agree. I think COVID was one of those great inflection points for the golf industry in general. I mean, for us as a business too, right?
Sure.
We were born out of a lot of that same sentiment, right? Being able to have a little bit more time and to say, yeah, we can still play together, right? And to your point, whether people didn't have time before and now they can, or it became one of the few things you can still do and feel comfortable because of just being out in the open, it did open so many doors for the industry, and for, I guess, opened everyone's eyes to the magic of the game when you finally get that feeling of you stripe one down the fairway, and it becomes a little bit infectious, right? You want to keep doing it, and especially if you're doing it with friends too. So I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that got into the game, and I remember having some early conversations and them saying to me, you know what, I get out there and I really sucked, but you know what, I went out there and hit a couple of really good shots, and my friends and I were playing next Saturday. And I'm like, wow. never played the game before, never had a lesson, but now they're coming out and playing. So it did open a lot of doors and opportunities for great companies like yourself, and I think it speaks volumes. I would imagine, though, that being as busy as you guys are, and I'm going to ask you personally, because you alluded to your handicap is probably not what you would like it to be. One of the sayings that we have in the industry is, if you want to play a lot of golf, don't get in the golf business, because you're going to get so busy doing other things that you won't get to play yourself. Are you starting to find that now, as the Blue Tees business is growing, that your game is suffering a little bit, not because of any technology you guys are putting out or any advantages, but you're just so gosh darn busy that you don't have time to get to the golf course as much as you'd like? Is that an accurate statement?
It is definitely an accurate statement. And, I think I look at it as a good thing. As much as I would definitely love to lower my handicap for sure, or get a little bit more time out there, it is a great time. And it's a really exciting time for us, especially this coming year. And, I think we have a really big year in front of us, probably the biggest year ever in the history of the brand and the business. We're coming out of the gate strong next year. We've got some really interesting brand evolutions happening. We have an entirely new product portfolio. We have a new category that we're going to be entering and launching, and I'm so excited to start talking about some of this stuff. And most importantly for us, we're now for the first time taking the vision we've always had as a brand, and we're actually making that the front and center of everything, from our marketing and our content to our products themselves. So certainly have my hands full these days.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, you know what? There'll be a day when you'll be able to retire from all this. If you decide to do that, maybe you'll be able to ratchet your game up a little bit at that point. But and it's just a fact of life. But I think it's exciting for you guys. I know there's a lot of things that you probably can't talk about in the coming season quite yet. You've got some things that maybe are not quite ready to be out in the public forum, and we'll have to have you come back on when it's time, and we can talk about that. But what do you want people, if you had a minute, and I'm going to give you a minute, and you wanted to send a message out to my audience, why they should look up Blue Tees, and I'll get you to give the website at the end of it, but what would your pitch be to them? What would you want them to know about Blue Tees to get them and encourage them to come and at least take a look?
So I think beyond what we just talked about, right? Whether you're out for a good vibe, you're out to lower your scores, you're out for a combination of everything. The thing I'm most excited for everybody to know and hear, especially moving into 2026 and beyond, is we have an ambitious goal. We're out to build what I would say is the most accessible and connected ecosystem in golf. And certainly a lot behind that, and a lot I'd love to talk about. But for us, we're trying to connect the dots between on season, off season, on course, off course, and really enable players to be able to take their data, whether they're training or whether they're playing on the course, and be able to just continue to refine that and just grow as a player and connect with others as a community. So even if you're out there playing with 3 other people that you've never played with before, or you have a regular foursome, right, we have something for you, and we want to make sure that we can continue to gamify that and just grow that community experience in a way that's never been done before. So I'm super excited if anyone has any interest in being able to do that, and especially do it in a way that's affordable, won't break the bank, and really cares about just that sense of style and a great intuitive experience, then we're for you for sure.
And the website?
blueteesgolf.com. Definitely give it a look.
Simple as that. Well, Joe, I want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing some insight, not only to Blue Tees, but into your experience as well, and into obviously the products. And they can go to blueteesgolf.com and see all of the things that we were talking about tonight and more. And I think there's going to be a lot of excitement coming on the horizon. I'm excited. I know, and we didn't touch into this, but this will be for the next conversation. But I know that AI is going to be playing a big proponent with a lot of companies moving forward, and I'm sure as equally involved in you guys as well. So we'll look forward to hear that as the changes come. But hang tight for a second. I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. A special thanks to my earlier guests, Pete Buchanan and Alex Fisher, for joining me on the Coach's Corner panel. And my sincerest apologies for those that were tuning in for our travel segment tonight. Unfortunately, our guest had a little bit of difficulty. Unfortunately, he was not able to connect with us, but we'll reschedule and get him back on. And then, of course, a very special thank you to my featured guest, Joe Pilcavage from Blue Tees Golf, VP of Marketing. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to tune in each and every week here on the Riverside.fm network, and you can go to the iGolf Sports YouTube channel and subscribe, and you can get all of the shows, including tonight. Thanks for tuning into Golf Talk Live, and I will see you next week right here on the show. God bless everybody.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.